Hi, I'm Kenz, and I'm here to talk to you about the Blair Witch Project. Specifically under the thesis that the Blair Witch Project was an extremely successful transmedia campaign that brought into question the ethics of such immersive experiences, especially during a time when the internet was still pretty new. So what is the Blair Witch Project, if you're unfamiliar? The Blair Witch Project is a 1999 horror movie made up of found footage, but honestly, it's a lot more than just the movie. While it was not the first found footage movie, it did popularize the genre. Found footage films are defined as feature-length films, shorts, or web series designed to have the look and feel of actual non-fictional filmed events that were lost and subsequently discovered and made available to the viewers. It's important to note that for the entire website and everything that we're going to delve into, the movie, the documentary, all of the little tidbits, they are completely made up by the film's creators. None of this is real. The mythology is not real, the stories are not real, the deaths are not real. It's an immersive experience that led up to a movie. Keep that in mind. The directors of the Blair Witch Project, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, really wanted to play into the affordances that come with found footage. It looks real, but they also put a lot of work into making sure it felt real too. In order to truly understand it, we need to first go through a timeline of what happened, of really everything that happened up until the film's release in 1999. And our story for these purposes start way back when the Blair Witch Project website went live. The website went live in June of 1998. It was a little over a year before the movie actually ended up coming out. The website wasn't there to advertise the movie, it just kind of existed. When you logged onto the site, you didn't see something that said, "Welcome to the page that promotes the movie The Blair Witch Project." It was just a scary, scary website that you found or stumbled on in 1998 that detailed the mythology behind the Blair Witch Project, and more specifically detailed the news story behind the 3 film students that had gone missing in the woods. When you go onto the website, it looks like a normal 1998 designed website, but honestly, maybe even a little better if you've seen other websites that were designed in 1998. I am looking at you, Yahoo. We're going from left to right on the titles on the home page. Then it tells a very spooky story of what exactly the Blair Witch Project entails. We start on the mythology. There's a lot there. They really put a lot of thought into the mythology section. To summarize, it says it's a timeline of major events in the history of the Blair Witch. It begins in 1785 with the story of a witch named Ellie Kedward, banished from the village of Blair for luring children into her home and drawing blood from them. She is then found guilty of witchcraft, and the townsfolk ban her from the town of Blair. During a particularly cold winter, she freezes to death, obviously is never seen again. End of that story. They renamed the town of Blair into Burkittsville, Maryland. Many years later, during 1941, several children go missing. An old hermit comes out of the woods. His name is Rustin Parr, and he admits to murdering them. And he states that a ghost of a witch in the woods made him do it. Obviously, he is convicted and then hanged. In October of 1994, 3 college filmmakers named Heather, Josh, and Mike go to the town to make a documentary about the myths. They hike into the woods and they are never seen again. A huge search ensues. Eventually in 1995, anthropology students find a duffel bag full of film equipment while they try digging around a 100-year-old building in the same woods that the students disappeared in. They find this duffel bag full of equipment, film equipment, tapes, sound, audio files, all of this stuff. And despite their findings, the police determine the case inactive and the film is handed over to the Haxon Films Company, which is the company that made the Blair Witch Project. And the Haxon Films is asked to analyze the footage and determine what happened by the victims' families. Then on the website, we can head over to the filmmakers section. It's a section that really dives into who the 3 students were, and it includes a lot of photos with captions on them of the students right before they went missing. The website shows a lot of photos of the students on Montgomery College campus, which is the college that they supposedly went to. This is in Rockville, Maryland. It shows the photos of them working together on film projects. There are childhood photos, photos of them with their loved ones. Mike has some photos with his girlfriend. I think Josh has some photos with his mom or grandma. It was really painting a picture of these were the lives that were lost. They also supposedly found their professional film bios that they wrote while they were in the woods camping. And they're very personal to the characters themselves. Heather's is very serious and to the point. She knows a lot about the mythology behind the Blair Witch. It's clear that this is her passion project from her bio alone. Josh's is professional, pretty to the point, says where he's from, when he started filming, his joys in life. And then Mike's is true to his character because it's very rambling. He mentions his on-again, off-again girlfriend. He talks about his part-time jobs and how he thinks the Blair Witch is bullshit. Not a professional thing at all, but it gives you a little bit of their personality before the film even comes out. When you go over to the aftermath section, there's a lot of photographic evidence of the case itself. There's photos of the police search, there's interview photos with family members and images from news reports of like when the event happened. At the time you couldn't really like go back and look up if those reports actually happened or were out there. When you move on to legacy, there's more photos of video and there's also some like photos of the audio evidence that they found, but the really big winner in the legacy section is Heather's diary. It's an old looking diary. It looks like it's been buried for a while. It starts off with some like doodles and nonsense, and then it follows her journey into the woods. And if you're discovering this website in 1998 and you know nothing about a film coming out, this is your look into what happened while they were out there. It really parallels what the film is doing. And so it shows her thoughts of like being alone with two boys, how they're not taking her seriously, how she's trying to appear more laid back so that they don't freak out on her, her struggles with directing and power, and then their descent into the woods, how they start fighting, things are getting a little tense, they don't know where they are anymore, they don't know what's happening, some weird things have been happening, and then her entries get shorter and shorter and then they drop off. Without any of the context of the Blair Witch Project, the movie, it's honestly a chilling read. When you get into the diary, you really start connecting that the Blair Witch is likely behind the student's disappearance. The reason this website was so effective as a tool in like transmedia storytelling was that this website looks as though it could be believable, and there's so much evidence on the website that it's hard to ignore it. So if you're just stumbling on it, it would honestly be terrifying. Then we get into their next phase of advertising for this movie. Again, the movie has not really been announced at this point. About 2 weeks before the movie is released, there is a mockumentary put on the Sci-Fi Channel. And so maybe you're not a big internet person in 1998, but you do turn on the TV, you watch the Sci-Fi Channel, and what do you find but The Curse of the Blair Witch, which is the Ken Burns style mockumentary that they produced and created and put on the Sci-Fi Channel. And so of course you're not going to question it, because again, no part of this documentary that aired was saying this is promotion for a movie and none of this is real. In fact, it only added more to the lore and legend of the Blair Witch. It really added a lot more truth claims to it. And I don't know if you've ever seen a Ken Burns style documentary where they have like the zoom in and the images on the screen and they're interviewing a bunch of people and there's some spooky music in the background, but they nailed basically every aspect of that. It looked very convincing.
Burkittsville was actually founded on another old town by the name of Blair, and it was founded here in 1734 to protect the western approaches to Baltimore from attack by the Indians and so forth. But it died out because of a witch.
I swear I've seen documentaries like this before. It's like a made-for-TV documentary. You could have just flipped on the channel and there it would be, and it would pique your interest enough that maybe you would want to see the movie. There was a couple other random things that they did to drive hype for the movie before it came out. Again, all of this was in the realm of the world. Never once did they admit that it was fake. And a lot of what they did afterwards really played into that. For example, Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, and Joshua Leonard, which were the actors in the film. Also the names of the characters in the film, they just used the actors' names. Before the film came out, they were listed as missing, presumed to be dead on IMDb. While advertisements for the Blair Witch Project was coming out, the actors were also hidden away. They weren't allowed to participate in any sort of press or advertisements, and they were asked to stay hidden until the film was released so that people wouldn't see them in the supermarket and go, hey, I thought you were supposed to be dead. The film mainly advertised on college campuses during the time, with the thought that because this was a very internet-based phenomenon, college students would have the most access to the internet. Also, the film was about 3 college students. So they would go on college campuses and they would hang up and pass out missing persons flyers with the 3 actors' faces on them and obviously their real names. One other thing that they did to drum up excitement, they asked the people who were editing it to just go ahead and make some bootlegs of it, and they would give it to the people who made it and a couple of other people and say, show it to your friends, do whatever you want, pass it around, we don't care. And so through that, an unfinished version of the film was able to be leaked online, and it drummed up even more excitement. So the movie itself was released July 30th, 1999, a little over a year after the website was made. It grossed $248.6 million in the box office, even though it was made with a budget of only about $30,000 initially. And yeah, honestly, it really looks like a video diary of some amateur filmmakers who are in college trying to make a very spooky documentary. The camera is shaking, the camera angles are awful. They'll sometimes cut to a black and white clip of what the actual documentary was supposed to be, what the students were trying to make. It's almost laughable how bad it is. And that's really what makes it so real. The movie also follows their journey into the woods. It starts with them being really excited, joking around with each other, then they get a little more tense, they're a little more hungry, a little more cold, some weird things start happening. Nobody really knows what's going on, but you never see anyone who might be responsible for any of this. You just see some maybe weird coincidences in the beginning. What started out as piles of rocks and bundles of sticks turns into noises in the middle of the night. Their tent is being jostled and they feel like they're being chased through the woods. It's a really slow build that ends in a haunting image and a harrowing climax in which you, the viewer, never really know what's going on, but you also don't really see anything that's like, oh, well, that's not real. It makes you believe that they really did experience something very strange and not something that's maybe able to be explained. Even the characters talk about what it could be, like some hunters playing a joke on them, but it just seems a little too voodoo and ritualistic to be anything else. The whole movie is just really smart. It leads you through what's happening so that you never stop believing that it's real. So all around, a very chilling movie. You hopefully understand how the movie came to be, what story the audience was following along with the whole time, from the website to the documentary to the other advertising methods to the movie itself. It's scary, and never once did they break and say that none of it was real and it's all just a movie and we made up all the mythology and the actors are okay. They were pretty committed to the bit. Kind of have to commend them for it. At the same time, now it's time to talk about the ethics of both the production of the film and the advertising of it, because let's be honest, it's a little dubious. Let's start with the filming. How the filming worked was the actors are out in the woods for 8 days. The actors were all given a GPS. In the GPS, it had coordinates of where their next location was. They had to actually legitimately hike to the next location by a specific time in the day. And once they reached that location, they would stumble upon something. They didn't know what, but it was going to be something. The actors were filming themselves, they were doing all the sound themselves, which obviously lended to the authenticity of the found footage. They're also given notes throughout the day or once a day telling them what it is that their character is trying to do or what needs to happen within this period of filming. Their goal was to have the cameras on as much as possible, and so for 24 hours a day for about almost 8 days, the actors were in character, and they were also wandering around the woods essentially alone. Famously, one of the directors said that their safety is their priority and not their comfort, and that really does prove to be true. You can tell that the actors trusted the directors, that they felt safe enough to say yes to this and take it on, but there was one instance in which their tent had flooded, it was raining all day, and they weren't going to sleep in the flooded tent, so they tried to say their safe word over the walkie-talkie to get some actual lodging for the night, and the crew had left to go eat dinner. So What that says to me is that means they were actually just alone in the woods. Nobody was around to hear their call, and so they had to hike out of the woods, find a house, knock on it, ask if they could use their telephone, this was a stranger, and take that risk upon themselves. So yes, safety was a priority for the crew, but also there are instances in which probably something bad could have happened. They also, you can tell, are having a lot of sleepless nights because the authenticity was really important to the crew. Basically all of the film was improvised. They just had about 35 pages of script of like what they wanted to happen. Not all of the actors knew all of the 35 pages, only some of them did. Heather Donahue knew quite a bit of mythology about the Blair Witch, but the other two guys did not. During the nighttime, if you've seen the film, that's when a lot of the scariest stuff happens. They'll try to go to sleep, they'll hear some strange noises in the woods. At one point they hear the sound of children in the distance or a lot of cracking and booming. They wake up to their tent being jostled and then they are being chased through the woods, or they feel like they are, but we never see what's happening. And we're seeing their reactions through all of this. You kind of get the sense that the actors really had to be on the entire time. If you're waking up in the middle of the night to something scary happening, their job was to first remember that they were an actor, then take out and turn on the camera, then start filming and reacting. All that to say, kudos to them, but it doesn't really seem like a situation many people would want to be in. And in fact, Heather Donahue even said in an interview a few years ago that all the found footage movies now are not the same as the Blair Witch Project was, and they never can be because those are all union movies. The actors have snack tables and breaks, and they can only work a certain number of hours a day, and it doesn't have the feral feeling of the Blair Witch Project because the Blair Witch Project was immersive in every sense of the word, especially for the actors. When we're talking about the timeline, not what the audience was experiencing, but what was happening a little bit behind the scenes, it's important to note that the website went live in the summer of 1998. The film actually aired for the first time at the Sundance Festival in January of 1999. And once it was seen, it was purchased by Artisan Films, a company that no longer exists, but it was purchased for about $1.1 million. They really fueled a lot of the last bit of advertising, such as getting the mockumentary on the Sci-Fi Channel, listing the IMDb actors as dead. They were responsible for hiding the actors away. Haxan Films really wanted to make vague statements. They were kind of more dedicated to just not giving the audience any context and letting them connect the dots on their own, whereas Artisan Films really thought it was important to try and push the boundaries of the truth as much as possible. The website was a really amazing interactive way for audiences to stumble across the story, but when you get into the other parts of this transmedia narrative, this like multimodal form of advertising that never breaks character, a lot of that was driven by Artisan Films. And obviously it worked. It worked really well. When Artisan asked consumers how many people believed in the mythology of the Blair Witch, that the Blair Witch myth was true, not that the students had died, but that the Blair Witch existed, about 50% of people said that they believed that the Blair Witch myth was true. It is important to note that in 1998, when the website went live, only about 9% of households had access to the internet, which means that only about 41% of people, according to the Pew Research Center, were online at the time. Maybe they accessed the internet in their workspace or a public library or a university, but only 9% of people had access to internet in their own household. So you have a very small group of people who are discovering the film through the internet, and since the internet only existed for 7 years, it's like they're uncovering this dark secret. And a lot of people felt really, really betrayed by the fact that the film was fake. There was this feeling of like, you tricked us, do you think that we're stupid? It was a lot of betrayal for the followers. Some of their other advertising also backfired a little bit, such as handing out missing posters on college campuses and around college towns. They did have one instance that somebody was actually missing and they had to remove all of their posters. Ultimately though, the film was never meant for mass consumption. Haxan Films did this on a budget of $30,000 with 3 unknown actors, and they never meant for it to get this big. I don't think anybody had really stopped to consider what would happen if the film actually did reach mass audiences and what making up information on the internet would do when millions of people were also involved. So then we have to start talking about the backlash to the film. When you look at interviews of those involved in the film, the two directors, the two male cast members, they say yes, there was a lot of backlash, but also we're very proud of the film. We broke the rules of marketing and make-believe, and we love that people were so involved and invested in the story. However, the woman who played Heather Donahue, who has since changed her name to Ray Hans, when she talks about the film, you can really feel a lot of trauma there. In her words, people wished that she was actually dead. They would see her and they would become very upset that she was alive. They would feel their feelings of being lied to, and she dealt with a lot of backlash because of that. Her career also faltered. Often said that one of her greatest regrets in life was using her real name, which was Heather Donahue at the time, because people took her appearance in it very personally. She had to leave the film industry in about 2008 because it was hard to get jobs when people thought you were dead. It's hard to escape that. Once you've used your real name, your identity kind of belongs to someone else. Heather Donahue will forever be the character that died in the Blair Witch Project. A lot of people would yell at her when they found out she was alive, or they would tell her that no, she was dead, Heather Donahue had died. Even after showing them her ID, they wouldn't believe that it was Heather Donahue standing in front of them. In one instance, somebody did run her off the road because they were so enraged that she was alive. She was paid $1,000 a day for the 8 days of filming. For that, she was followed with a lifetime of people sending her parents condolence cards and people asking for their $10 back for what they spent on the movie, her being denied parts because she can't possibly be alive. Eventually, she became a medical marijuana grower. She wrote a book about it. But in an interview about the new Blair Witch movie that came out in 2016, she was asked to be a part of it, and she reported crying in the bathtub for many hours just at the thought that the Blair Witch Project could resurface again and gain more popularity. She also stated that she regretted the camera angle of the infamous up-the-nose crying shot. If you've ever seen a poster for the movie, it is what is on the poster is that shot of her crying, and she regrets that because people hated that a woman was on the big screen looking so human and ugly, and it is like the most awful, human, devastating scene in the movie. And she regrets it because in the year 2000 she did end up winning the Razzie Award for Worst Actress, just because so many people were mad at both the character of Heather Donahue for how she acts in the movie, and they were mad at her performance and the snot and the realness of it. So she really went through a lot for the part. So in conclusion of this whole thing, this whole transmedia narrative, this multimodal, interactive, immersive advertising, I think the film was successful because of how real it was, because of how believable it is. And even to this day, if you Google the Blair Witch Project, the first thing that Google suggests is the Blair Witch Project real. Because even today, 23 years later, almost a quarter of a century later, it's still making people guess as to what is real and what isn't. And so I want to state, I really do love the film. But when we talk about the ethical implications of such broad and immersive transmedia marketing, I think it's best to look at a quote from the article that The Ringer did about it recently, in which they say, they deceived the public and profited off of it. And obviously they couldn't have predicted the most recent happenings in the United States with the spread of misinformation and fake news, but in a way they did contribute to bringing it about. Obviously, when they made the film, they couldn't have predicted the turn that the internet would take with the spread of fake news and misinformation and the need to fact check, but in a way they did kind of plant the seed of misinformation. In 1998, the internet was just regarded as fact. There's a quote from Kevin Fox, one of the directors of one of the Blair Witch films, and he says it was like a second library. Everything on there was the truth, and you didn't want to second guess it, and you didn't have to second guess it. Nobody on the internet would lie, would they? It's this wealth of information. It's like an encyclopedia, but at your fingertips. You don't have to flip pages for it. Why would there be untruths on there? Conspiracy theories maybe, but outright lies, questionable. Obviously, it was an outright lie, all of it, and they lied and they profited off of it. And again, it is one of the most amazing movies I've ever seen. It's one of the most amazing forms of immersive storytelling I've ever seen. It included the fans, it inspired conspiracy theories, it invented a mythos, a detailed mythos, and it's an incredible movie with phenomenal acting. But I think that they were so concerned with making it seem real that they didn't think about what would happen when they succeeded, especially not if they succeeded at the scale that they did. They had a grueling film process. An actress's career and huge parts of her life were ruined with seemingly no attempt to help her through that. None of them came out and said like, hey guys, the movie's fake, she's real, can we all be chill for a second? Instead, they were really just like enjoying it and profiting off of it while she suffered and while the other actors also suffered. Not as much as the one woman in the cast, and from what I can tell, one of the only women in the making of the movie. Her life was severely affected in a very negative way, and they'd never offered any way to help her through that, or even to clear the air, because they were so focused on making sure that the lie was maintained. At the same time, I think this was the moment that the internet kind of realized that you can kind of say whatever you want, and you might get away with it. If you work hard enough to make a lie seem real, then you might get millions of people to believe in it. And that's exactly what we see today with the spread of misinformation and certain campaigns. During the 2016 campaign, the Trump campaign paid a lot of money to make sure that certain people and their data were targeted to get specific ads that were lies. The ads were outright lies. But because so much effort went into constructing the mythos of the lie, lies around Hillary Clinton and the left and liberals and Democrats, because it was so well constructed, you're not going to look at pictures of things and hear stories of things from multiple sources and say that's not true. Even today, you know, we're taught to fact check, but it's to the point where it's almost like you can't trust the fact checker. Who's doing the fact checking? What is real? And if something is constructed, does that make it less real? It's real on the internet. To be honest, I think the only reason we know that the Blair Witch Project is fake is because it was a major film, and you know, the actors have interviewed since then and the directors have interviewed since then, but there is a whole like a fan Wikipedia page dedicated to like the mythos and the various aspects of the Blair Witch Project, because it goes a lot further than this. There's so many different tiny parts of the mythos that were taken and turned into their own books or movies or mockumentaries or video games. There's a whole transmedia world out there of the Blair Witch Project. It's extensive, it's vast, and multiple times during the making of this project, of this case study, I would have to ask if certain people were real, or if the legend was real, if Rustin Parr, the guy who killed 7 kids, was real. It just felt so real. I watched the mockumentary, I was convinced at least. I knew the found footage was fake, but I went, the Blair Witch is real. Everything else is real. They just found a myth and they based a movie off of it. They did an incredible job. And if it wasn't for it gaining as much success and popularity as it was, I question whether we would ever really even know it wasn't real. If they hadn't turned it into a mass production, if they had just leaked it online in a couple of different places and then the internet pieced it together, would we still be sitting here thinking that 3 students died in the woods and were never seen again? Because I might. I'll be honest. It's a little terrifying. I don't think that it was unique to the time period. I think the newness of the internet helped to make the lie, but I think even now you have thousands and maybe even millions of people believing things that aren't true because of communities online and because of stories online that are spreading it. And I do think that the Blair Witch Project played a part in that overarching story. So I think the real moral of the story is that the true horror is misinformation. Don't spread fake news. Yeah.